Welcome to Recruiter Wins, your bite-sized 15-minute podcast with your host, Zach Gallinger. This is the show where every guest answers one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. You'll hear everything from gut-wrenching candidate conversations to game-changing business development wins. Real stories with lessons you can actually use in your next search.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Recruiter Wins. My name is Zach Gallinger and I'm the founder of Talent Hero Media, a digital marketing agency that works exclusively with recruiters. In this podcast, we sit down with a highly successful recruiting expert to ask them a single question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win. Our guest today is Lindsey Bozzio, the Chief Operating Officer of SurfSearch. SurfSearch has been recruiting the life sciences space for over 10 years. Welcome to the show, Lindsey.
Thanks, Zach. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. And as I always do, let's just jump right into it. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.
Oh, biggest recruiting win. I'll recollect one that is a recent win of ours. We were working with a medical device client of ours who was looking for a design engineer, a product development engineer to grow their R&D team. This particular client is one we've been supporting for a little over 3 years, more or less now. So we know their business quite well. We know their company culture quite well. And we have a great working relationship with their HR team as our primary point of contact. This position was very much significant key part in their R&D as they develop continuous medical device products to promote in the medical device space. The R&D team is rather small, and they're quite particular in that they would like candidates who are very passionate about medical device and about R&D, which sometimes can be tricky to find in an engineering professional. Not to say anything bad about engineers, but
I get it.
Sometimes they're not as enthusiastic as other professionals. So they really looking for, a very strong mix of not only the skill set in medical device innovation, but also someone that is enthusiastic and can work well on the team, is a great company fit for their culture. We opened the job and it was very quick. Within maybe a week or so, I found a candidate just through a LinkedIn search that had an incredible skill set. He was very impressive on paper, had a conversation with him. He was extraordinarily enthusiastic, very passionate about medical device innovation. And I just knew, from the moment I had that connection with him, that he was exactly what our client was looking for. Unfortunately, he was very tied and committed to staying at his company. We had a great conversation about his career goals and he wanted to keep in touch. You know how that goes. Just wasn't ready to make a move at that particular time, which was, of course, unfortunate. But we maintained a great relationship as we continued moving forward, supporting our client. They interviewed a handful of candidates. None of them ended up being the mix of skill set and cultural match that we knew they were looking for. So we had a few on-sites and none of them ended up working out. They decided to pause the search about a month and a half, 2 months in, due to the hiring manager leaving the country to visit their on-site facility over in Asia, where he would be for the next few months. So we paused the search, knowing that we would pick it back up when he returned. During that time, candidate A, the rockstar candidate that I initially connected with, I decided to just reach out to him and see how he was doing, as I like to keep in touch with the candidates that I feel are really quite stellar. And it happened to be that during the time that the hiring manager was overseas, he got the information that his company had a change in investors, meaning they were shutting down the facility, just changes within the company that he was with. It was a startup organization, and sometimes that kind of stuff happens in the startup world. So unfortunately, he was going to be out of the job in the near future. This all kind of spiraled in a funny way. So I connected with him again. We had a conversation again about the position, even though I knew the role was on hold. I wanted to keep him engaged. And we decided this kind of depends on the client that you're working with. Maybe we wouldn't do this with all the partners that we support, but we decided to submit him, even though the role was on hold, to our HR partner, just because, one, we wanted to stake our claim on this candidate, knowing that he might be on the job market applying to their job board directly. He knew who the company was, so I don't think that he in particular would have done that, but it's always a risk. He could have done that, and then we wouldn't be considered our candidate anymore. They decided, obviously Shu said he looks great. I would love to consider him if the timing is right with the hiring manager returns, which he did return 4 weeks later. Unfortunately, we maintained the conversation with the candidate, told him, they're not quite ready. Let's give it some time. And he ended up still being available when the hiring manager did return, in which they scheduled a conversation quickly and got him on site. Within a week, he had an offer. So yeah, it was a very exciting win for us in that it was very much a long game with this candidate along with our client. So resulting in a great candidate and a great match and just, I think, a great partnership between the candidate and the client that we work with. So yeah, that was a fun recruiting win that we experienced just a couple months ago. So yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Lindsey. A lot of twists and turns of that story. And I want to just ask you a few follow-up questions to try and maybe get some interesting takeaways. So you mentioned that the client paused the search and then reopened it. How do you keep someone like that engaged, ensuring that when the search opens, they come back to you, not someone else who might have contacted them in the interim?
Yep, that's a great question. This particular client, with most of the clients that we represent, I think that maintaining a relationship, not just as a transactional relationship, but also just as a personal relationship, I think we do a pretty great job of engaging with our clients just as it relates to their wins outside of recruiting, outside of talent acquisition. We see they got a new product on the market. We send them a congratulations. That's a huge development. Those types of engagements with your clients can really put you at the forefront of their mind when they come to think of, their talent acquisition needs. So I think that kind of relationship is one we foster in a great way. So.
And when you're talking about seeing that they release a new product, is that something that you're proactively searching out, or is that might be something that comes across your LinkedIn feed?
I mean, it's tough to, it's tough to keep track of all of your clients. Obviously, they're all doing fun things. So I follow all of our clients on LinkedIn, and our clients do a pretty good job of advertising their wins. So yeah, we see it's either there or just in a news article. So yeah, that's usually where we see it. But sometimes we do, if it's a client that's been a while that we haven't engaged with in some time, and maybe they're not hiring, we want to maintain that relationship, keep it going. We'll look up and see what they've got going on. And just if something looks exciting, then we'll just touch base with them and say, see, you got this FDA approval. Congratulations. That's awesome news.
That makes sense. And I usually don't give my own advice on this podcast, but I've been using ChatGPT as a way of just keeping track of these types of news events. And it works really well, especially the thinking mode so basically you got to give it a list of whatever number of companies and ask if there's anything that's been published in the past X number of days. And if there is anything, it'll probably surface it. So that's just another way, I think, to stay on top of things.
Great tip. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so next question. You said that this candidate was a great fit. In general, how do you decide which candidates are worth staying in touch with over a long pause, right? I'm sure many people say they're not available right now. When you contact them, that's kind of normal for a recruiter, but you can't probably proactively, stay on top of everyone. So what are you looking for when you decide that someone is worth following?
It's a bit of a loaded question because it depends on your client. So I knew from the moment that I had a conversation with this particular candidate that he was one to keep in touch with for this particular client. It really depends. It's just almost like gut feeling. If you know your client well, then you know what they're looking for. You know which candidates will be the ones to keep in touch with. There are many candidates that, unfortunately, I just don't have the time to keep in touch with. That's just part of this business. But the ones that really stand out for any particular client that we're working with, I maintain a relationship with for sure. So it's tough because the answer kind of is dependent on the client, I suppose, if that makes sense.
Of course. No, that does. So yeah, the candidates are only, I guess you're saying that a candidate in general who is not necessarily someone you have in mind for a specific role is probably not someone you're going to closely follow over a longer time.
Yeah, probably not. There are a few candidates that I've maintained a really strong relationship with just because I just think they're great people. And, part of this business is we're people. We like in touch with people. So, but I do think that this particular candidate, his unique skill set, along with the charisma that I know that this particular client really values, I probably would have kept in touch with him regardless of this position in general, actually moving forward, just because I know that there's a limited amount of candidates like this in this geographical area. So,
right. That makes sense. So a sort of different question, I guess, next. You mentioned this story is kind of about staying in touch with people, staying on top of things. Have you found anything in the AI world that has helped with that? Or have you tested things that have just not been helpful? The reason I'm asking is that I know a lot of recruiters have said to me that The reason they're not too worried about AI is that recruiting is a people business. You need to have these relationships. Of course, and I don't think at the moment AI is going to take that away, but is there anything that could help a little bit with staying on top of things? Or is it not quite ready to do things at the level that you would hope?
That's a good question. We have tested out some softwares that are like touchpoints every once in a few months or weeks just to keep in touch with candidates. We haven't really gotten many responses from those types of outreaches because it is such a people relation business. I think that it's important to keep that relation in the outreach. The personal touch point we have with our candidates is what keeps them engaged. So yeah, unfortunately, we haven't seen too much success with that yet, but you never know. Things might change.
Right. I mean, yeah, I've seen it. I think for me, the biggest issue with all the current technology is how stilted the writing often is. And I've just never seen anything that writes like a human, and I'd feel comfortable, sending to somebody without verifying it. At that point, it's not saving you that much time.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's all the questions I have for you today. Thanks for joining me and sharing that story. It was great. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Zach. Always good to be here.
Bye, Lindsey.
See you later.
Thanks for listening to Recruiter Wins. Please join us again when we ask our next recruiter one simple question. Tell me about your biggest recruiting win.